Good afternoon, students. Chapter 11 talks about risk return and capital asset pricing model or CAPM. We have discussed this in many other chapters. So let us now go in detail. We will know how to calculate the expected return and how to calculate covariance, correlation, and beta. We will calculate the beta through the uh, formula method, and at the same time we will try to learn how to do it in the spreadsheet. Same like covariance correlation, we can also use the spreadsheet for calculating directly. We will understand the impact of diversification, understand the systematic risk principle and unsystematic risk principle, or diversified risk and non-diversified risk. Understand the security market line SML and risk return trade-off. After that, we'll be able to use the capital asset pricing model or CAPM. The chapter is divided into 9 subsections. Individual security will be taken in first section. Second section will talk about expected return, variance and covariance. Third one will talk about return and risk portfolio. The efficient set of two assets will be taken in fourth section. Fifth section will talk about efficient set of many security and diversification. Then we'll see the riskless borrowing and lending, how it happens, how the risk-free rate of return is being taken and used, market equilibrium, then how to calculate the CAPM. When you are talking about individual security, it is a single security. So we can calculate the expected return of the single security. We'll calculate the variance, square root that. We'll get the standard deviation. As you know, standard deviation is the square root of variance. We will calculate the covariance and correlation to another security or another index. Here is an example given. You have the forecasting of the economic scenarios. You forecast 33.3% probability of recession, similarly 33.3% normal and 33.3% in boom. That means 1/3 probability of becoming recession economy, 1/3 probability of becoming a normal economy, 1/3 probability of becoming a boom economy. You are forecasting. Now, if the economy will go into recession, the stock fund will give -7%, whereas the bond fund will give you 17%. If the economy is normal, stock fund will give you 12% positive, bond fund will give 7% positive. If the economy goes into boom, the stock fund will give you 28%, whereas the bond fund will give you -3%. Now, how we will calculate the expected return of stock fund, expected return of bond fund, variance of stock fund, variance of bond fund, standard deviation of stock and bond fund, then covariance between stock and bond fund, correlation also we can calculate between stock and bond fund. All these things we'll calculate in this section. So write down the formula. The expected return is equal to probability of return multiplied by possibility of return. The formula for expected return is equal to probability of return multiplied by possibility of return. So have you written? So anytime if expected return is being asked with probability, if possibilities are provided, you can calculate the expected return by multiplying the probability of return multiplied by possibility of return. Here, for example, for stock fund, probability of return is 1/3 possible probability of recession, 1/3 normal, 1/3 boom. These are the probabilities. Possibilities of return are -7%, 12%, 28%. So the multiplication will be here for expected return for stock fund is equal to minus 7% multiplied by 1/3, that's the probability, plus 12% multiplied by again 1/3, that's the probability, plus 28% multiplied by 1/3, then it will be the expected return for stock fund. Now for bond fund, 17% multiplied by 1/3 plus 7% multiplied by 1/3 plus minus 3% multiplied by 1/3 will be the expected return for bond fund. This is the way we calculate the expected return. So probability of return multiplied by possibility of return will give you the expected return. So the expected return for stock fund, can you see here, 11%. How this 11% came? I told you the formula. Minus 7%, that is the rate of return, multiplied by the 1/3 possibility, plus 12% multiplied by 1/3 probability, plus 28% multiplied by 1/3 is equal to 11%. Clear? So expected return of the stock fund is equal to 1/3 probability multiplied by minus 7%, plus 1/3 probability multiplied by 12%, plus 1/3 probability multiplied by 28% is equal to expected return of the stock fund. Same like you can calculate for the bond fund. We have 1/3 probability multiplied by 17%, plus 1/3 probability multiplied by 7%, plus 1/3 probability multiplied by minus 3% will be equal to 7% for the bond fund. So I hope expected return you can now easily calculate. Possibility of return multiplied by probability of return gives you the expected return. Now let us go to the variance. Variance will be calculated through the squared deviations. How we calculate the deviation? Very simple. From each possibility of return, we will deduct the expected return. So for stock fund, minus 7% minus 11% is equal to minus 18% to the power square is equal to 0.0324. In normal, for the stock fund, deviation will be 12% minus 11% is equal to 1% to the power square is equal to 0.0001. For boom economy, 28% minus 11% is equal to 17% to the power square is equal to 0.0289. We have calculated all the deviations from the expected return, squared it. Once you add back, you get the variance. How? 0.0324 plus 0.0001 plus 0.0289 multiplied by the all the divisions multiplied by the probability, or you can say number of situations 3 here, so divided by 3, as you know, so it will give you the variance. Sum of squared deviation divided by number of consequences, 3 here, so divided by 3 will give you the variance. Variance is how much? 0.0205. Now how we will get the standard deviation 14.3? Once you square root the variance, you get the standard deviation. So the standard deviation will be equal to 0.0205, that is the variance. Square root of that will give you 0.143 is equal to 14.3%. So this is the way we calculate the expected return. Probability of return multiplied by possibility of return is equal to expected return. Then once you get the expected return, from each variable you deduct the expected return. Like minus 7 minus 11 is equal to minus 18. Square of that will be the square deviation 0.0324. 12 minus 11 is equal to 1. Square of that is equal to 0.0001. 28 minus 11 is equal to 17%. Square of that will be 0.0289. Once you do that, add all these things, divided by 3 will give you the variance. So Once you get the variance, square root of that will give you the standard deviation. This we have done for whom? For individual security. We have done for stock fund. We have done for bond fund. Now we will calculate the covariance between stock fund and bond fund. How we do that? We have calculated in the previous slide here squared deviations. We will not square the deviation. Simply we will take the deviation from the expected return. In stock fund, what will be the deviation? Minus 7 minus 11 is equal to minus 18. You see here. Deviation in normal situation will be 12% minus 11% is equal to 1%. Similarly, in boom economy, 28% minus 11% is equal to 17%. So we have calculated the deviation of stock fund. Now let us calculate the deviation from bond fund. 17 minus 7 is equal to 10%. Similarly, 7 minus 7 is equal to 0%. Similarly, for boom, minus 3 minus 7 is equal to minus 10. Once you get the deviation from stock fund, deviation from the bond fund, from the expected return, you multiply them, you product them. Once you multiply them, it comes minus 0.0180, minus 0 multiplied by anything is equal to 0. 17 multiplied by minus 10 is equal to minus 0.0170. We multiply this with the probability. Probability is 1/3. So product multiplied by 1/3 probability is equal to weighted product. Minus 0.0180 multiplied by 1/3 is equal to minus 0.0060. So we multiplied the probability with the multiplication of stock fund, stock deviation and bond deviation. Then we got the sum. That will be the covariance. So what we have done, we calculated the deviation from the stock fund, deviation from the bond fund, multiplied them, multiplied the probability with the product, sum total will be the covariance. Now what we will do? We will calculate the correlation. Correlation between stock fund and bond fund. The formula for stock fund and bond fund correlation is equal to covariance between stock fund and bond fund divided by standard deviation of stock fund multiplied by standard deviation of the bond fund. We have calculated everything. Covariance just before slide we calculated minus 0.117. Covariance calculated and numerator we got it. Denominator, the standard deviation of stock fund, standard deviation of bond fund we calculated here. 14.3 is the standard deviation of stock fund. 8.2 is the standard deviation of the bond fund. Then we got the correlation minus 0.998. So correlation always varies between +1 to -1. If the correlation is here, the correlation is very close to -1. If the correlation is +1, then there is no point of diversification. There will not be any benefit because both the securities will move in one direction. So if market goes up, both security will go up. If market will go down, both will be going down. So therefore, there is no point of holding a security having the same positive correlation, particularly positive +1 or close to +1 correlation securities should not be there in a portfolio. What should be there in a portfolio? Zero correlation or negative correlation securities will give benefit of diversification. How? For example, here you have stock fund, you have bond fund, and they have correlation of minus 0.998. That means what? If one fund is going up, the other fund is going down. So in total, you are getting, when you average, your return is very much normal. Neither very abnormal positive or very abnormal negative. You are getting a very normal return. So it is always advisable to hold securities in a portfolio having zero correlation or negative correlation. If there is negative, close to -1 is the perfect combination in a portfolio. This is the way we see it. Now, in the coming slides, we will see how all these things we have calculated in a mathematically we have calculated through the formula. The expected return, that is equal to probability of return multiplied by possibility of return. Then we calculated the deviation from the returns. Then we squared the deviation of returns, sum of the squared deviation divided by number of observations gave us the variance. Square root of the variance gave us the standard deviation. Then we have calculated, once we have the deviations available with us, both deviations we multiplied, stock deviation, bond deviation multiplied, further multiplied with the weights, we sum total, get the covariance. Once you get the covariance, you can apply the formula covariance of stock fund and bond fund divided by standard deviation of stock fund and standard deviation of bond fund will give you the correlation. So this is the way, once you get the correlation, you can get a kind of good idea whether this is good for diversification or not. How you do that? If you are